We've covered minor factions in New Vegas, like the Vipers who worshipped a snake god. We've also seen Fallout 3 groups like the Chinese Remnants, who are still around 200 years later. And today, we'll look at secret factions that you might not have interacted with in Fallout 4. Every Tuesday, I'll be covering the minor and large factions of Fallout. So if that sounds interesting to you, then consider subbing and sticking around. We also have a ton of other Fallout topics on the channel and a lot more to come. Enjoy the vid, guys. The Atom Cats are a small faction in Fallout 4. They're a greaser-style gang that loves power armor and 1950s hot rod culture. Their home is the Atom Cats' garage, where their leader Zeke runs things. The crew includes Duke, Roxy, Rowdy, Blue Jay, Johnny D, and the late Aim and Andy, who's remembered for the music still playing around the garage. The Cats stand out because of their constant supply of power armor. Scavengers visit their garage regularly, bringing them T-60 suits most of the time, but also T-45 and T-51, and even X-01, but on very rare occasions. This makes the group a target for raiders and gunners who want their tech. Zeke likes to tell the story of how he single-handedly killed a pack of feral ghouls to claim the garage, before turning it into a base for teaching others the way of cool. Their style is unmistakable. Members wear greaser jackets and jeans, and their symbol is a smoking, sharp-toothed cat that stands in front of a mushroom cloud with the name Atom Cats. Their power armor is customized with hot rod decals. They've got flames and checkerboard patterns, making them one of the most unique-looking groups in the Commonwealth. When it comes to the sole survivor, you might run into Duke wandering around the Commonwealth in search of abandoned power armor, and if you haven't found the garage yet, he'll mark it on the map. At the garage, the Cats offer their unique power armor paint job for sale, and even open the door to membership. To join, the sole survivor needs to repair a water pump at the Warwick homestead, and then defend the garage against a gunner attack. Helping the Atom Cats further and building a stronger relationship with them unlocks the Friends of the Cats perk, which gives a discount on their shop items. I still find comments about people never running into these guys or being surprised by them, so hopefully there's a few of you that are surprised. The Forged are a raider gang who have claimed Saugus Ironworks as their base. They're obsessed with fire and metal, and their insane initiation rituals scar their bodies with burns. Slag, their leader, only started the gang months before 2287, but they quickly gained a reputation as one of the most feared groups in the area. Slag struggled to find recruits. Most Commonwealth raiders couldn't survive the initiation, which he called honing to an edge. Things changed when he came across nearby gunners at Hub City Auto Wreckers. Some of them attempted the trials and succeeded, causing friction with their leaders, but also proving that the Forged could hold their own. From there, word spread, and more raiders wanted to join. Life among the Forged is harsh. Candidates have to pass deadly trials, and failure means execution. Members are forced to change their names to something tougher, usually tied to firearm machinery. The terminal at the Ironworks lists failures like arsenic and riptide, people who didn't survive or weren't loyal enough. The punishments are cruel. Crying out during pain means amputation and exile, while falling asleep on watch leads to blinding. Disobedience can even lead to the execution of the offender's family. The gang has ties to the Dunwich Borers, where their member Bedlam oversees operations and supplies metal to the Ironworks. Slag likes to keep tabs on the fate of the other raider gangs too, leaving terminal notes about groups like Libertalia and the Corvega assembly plant. The Finch family also becomes involved when Jake Finch, who tries to protect his home, hands over his family's sword, the Shish Kebab, to Slag. Their weapons and armor show their obsession with fire. They have flamers, molotovs, and heavy incinerators taken from Enclave remnants as prized tools, with the incinerator used as a reward for successful initiates. A lot of them carry laser weapons modified for fire damage, while melee fighters use sledgehammers or super sledges. Their armor is distinctive, built with spiked and cage pieces instead of the usual raider gear. Slag is the only member with power armor. The Forged are a pretty nasty faction, but nothing the sole survivor can't handle. Covenant looks like a welcoming little settlement, but it's really a cover for Rosalind Chambers' research. After the Broken Mask incident in 2229, when a rogue synth killed her parents in Diamond City, she dedicated her life to creating a way to expose synths hiding among humans. Almost 60 years later, Covenant is the end result. A town set up to attract travelers so she can test her method, the safe test. The people running Covenant aren't just random settlers either. They're all survivors of Institute attacks who swore secrecy and believe in Chambers' mission. Every visitor has to take the safe test before they're allowed through the gates. It's presented as a psychological exam, but in reality it's just a slightly altered version of the old GOAT test. If someone fails, they're marked as a potential synth and taken to the compound. There, the test is repeated in a controlled environment. Refusing to cooperate or trying to avoid questions leads to torture, and Chambers even encourages failures because she sees them as useful sacrifices in her research. No matter what, every interrogation ends the same. On the dissection table, where she cuts into the brain to confirm if the victim was human or synth. People flagged as synths are abducted and forced through the process. Those who resist questioning are tortured until they comply, and trying to avoid answers doesn't stop the abuse, it just prolongs it. To Chambers, this is all necessary to make her test perfect, even if it means countless innocent lives are destroyed in the process. The most ironic part is that the Institute is completely aware of what Covenant is doing. They don't bother stopping it because in their eyes, the project isn't a threat. To them, Covenant is insignificant compared to their real operations. For the sole survivor, Covenant becomes central in the quest Human Error. How you handle the situation decides the fate of the town. You can expose the truth and put an end to Chambers' work, or you can side with the residents and keep the project going. The Triggermen are a group of organized crime gangs. They aren't one single crew, but rather a collection of syndicates that share a common style and a set of rules, heavily inspired by Boston's old mafia families. A lot of their ghoul members actually say they've been part of those pre-war organizations, which explains the way they run things. They prefer suits and fedoras over typical raider gear, and they care more about maintaining that image than wearing practical armor. Their operations are scattered across different hideouts, with Vault 114 and Park Street Station being their main bases. Skinny Malone made a name for himself by leading a group that took over Vault 114, which turned him from a small-time player into one of the top Triggermen bosses. Other leaders include Murawski, who controls a chem production ring, and you have Eager Ernie, who runs the Easy City Downs. The syndicates don't function as a united front, but they respect the same traditions and maintain connections through overlapping deals. The Triggermen handle a variety of illegal businesses. Murawski's crew produces chems out of the old Forley fish packing plant, smuggling them into Diamond City through contacts like Henry Cook, and with backing from the wealthy Latimer family. At Easy City Downs, the Triggermen are partnered with raiders to operate a robot racetrack, taking bets and skimming profits. In Good Neighbor, Hancock tolerates their presence as long as they don't overstep. If one gang grows too bold and threatens his position, he has no problem shutting them down. Even though they're criminals, the Triggermen have a kind of code. They're not as chaotic as raiders, and sometimes they'll even show mercy. For example, Skinny Malone spared Nick Valentine out of respect for their shared past. They're also occasionally hired by powerful figures, including Hancock himself. In The Big Dig, 2 Triggermen are even seen working alongside his bodyguard Fahrenheit, showing that line between ally and rival is thin depending on the deal at hand. Most Triggermen are hostile to the sole survivor, but encounters can vary. Some will remain neutral or cooperative if it benefits them. Submachine guns are their trademark, with some using assault rifles at higher levels. Melee fighters favor baseball bats, sticking to classic gangster looks instead of heavy protection, which makes them stand out compared to the other factions in the Commonwealth. Eager Ernie, as we know, also oversees several robots at Easy City Downs, mostly for racing, but if the Triggermen are attacked, those bots are turned against their enemies. Acadia is a synth refuge found on Mount Desert Island in Maine, introduced in the Far Harbor add-on. And I already know what you're thinking. This isn't a secret faction because it's tied to the main quest. Yes, but it's still a minor faction in the grand scheme of things, so I had to throw them in. That goes for any similar group in this list. Acadia is led by Dima, one of the Institute's earliest prototype synths, alongside his close allies Faraday and Chase. The colony is set up inside a pre-war observatory, which is where its name comes from. Acadia's goal is simple: give runaway synths a safe place where they don't have to hide what they are. The origins of Acadia are tied to Dima himself. He was one of the 2 experimental synths the Institute created to test out independent thought and self-awareness. Dima was allowed to form his own personality, while his brother was forced to carry implanted human memories. That brother became Nick Valentine, who eventually believed he really was a pre-war detective. When Dima tried to escape with him in the late 2180s, Nick didn't recognize him. He attacked, and Dima had no choice but to knock him out and leave. From then on, Dima wandered without direction, trying to figure out his purpose outside of the Institute. For a time, he stayed in a cave on Mount Desert Island, spending nearly a year in isolation before deciding he would create a sanctuary for others like him. Along the way, he lived in a naval submarine base. This is where he met the Children of Adam and befriended their leader, Confessor Martin. The children accepted him, but when their numbers grew, Dima handed the base over to them and moved on to pursue his dream of a true synth haven. Dima crossed paths with two others who shared his vision: Faraday, a scientist synth, and Chase, a former courser who defected from the Institute and joined him. Together, they claimed the mountaintop observatory within Acadia National Park, turning it into a refuge where escaped synths could live openly. From then on, Acadia became a symbol of freedom for synths who managed to break away from the Institute. Dima wanted Acadia to remain self-sufficient, but he also couldn't ignore what was happening around the island. The people of Far Harbor were struggling to survive against the fog that crept inland. Against the advice of his followers, Dima had Faraday develop fog condensers, which were devices that could hold the mist back. Sharing this technology with Far Harbor ensured their survival and built a trading relationship, but it came at a cost. The children of Adam, who saw the fog as sacred, grew hostile toward Acadia, seeing Dima's interference as blasphemy. In the end, Acadia stands as a fragile experiment. It's both a safe haven for synths and a political balancing act between Far Harbor and the children of Adam. How long that balance lasts depends heavily on the choices made by the sole survivor. Trappers are one of the most dangerous groups roaming Mount Desert Island. They're not a united faction, but rather scattered bands of men driven insane by years of exposure to the fog and isolation. Once they were ordinary people, settlers or hunters, but the fog broke them down into something feral. According to old Longfellow, many of them weren't exactly friendly to outsiders even before they lost their sanity. Over time, their insanity turned them into predators, who treat people the way hunters once treated game. Instead of setting traps for animals, they set them for humans. They don't follow any real chain of command, but some groups stick together to defend territory they either once owned or basically claim for themselves. They're extremely possessive of land, willing to kill or cannibalize anyone who crosses into their space. On rare occasions, they'll spare someone who proves useful to them, but even that is temporary. While some Harbormen still pity the trappers as victims of the island, most of them see them as too far gone to save. Any ties to family or friendship from the past are long severed. Far Harbor's residents warn travelers not to even make eye contact with them, since any encounter usually ends in violence. Trappers act a lot like raiders in the Commonwealth. They attack on sight and are just as relentless in combat. But unlike raiders, they don't taunt or show much emotion, even when their own are being killed. Trappers protect themselves with rough gear suited to the island. Their signature trapper armor and coastal armor are usually mixed with scavenged leather or metal pieces from whoever they kill. For weapons, they rely on the same kinds of guns used by raiders, like pipe weapons or hunting rifles. But they'll also make use of Far Harbor's unique stuff, like lever-action rifles or harpoon guns. Some carry melee gear like meat hooks, but it's less common. They never use energy weapons, so solid ballistic protection is best defense against them. The Harbormen are the people of Far Harbor. Most of them are fishermen, living off the sea while fighting back the terrifying creatures that stalk the island. Others are refugees who lost their homes to the encroaching fog and were forced to retreat to the safety of Far Harbor's docks. Life for the Harbormen is harsh, but they value independence above all else. Each one considers themselves the captain of their own ship. They're known for being wary of outsiders, especially anyone from the mainland. That mistrust extends to the children of Adam, who they openly blame for the spread and lethality of the fog. The two groups are locked in conflict, with no chance of peace as long as the fog threatens the Harbormen's survival. Despite their suspicion of outsiders, respect can be earned. Teddy Wright's family, for example, came from the mainland, but they won their place among the Harbormen after generations of service as doctors. Another way outsiders can prove themselves is by taking part in the captain's dance, a dangerous trial that if survived, grants acceptance. Acadia synths are a different story. As we know, the Harbormen owe their survival to Dima and his followers, since they created and shared the fog condensers that keep Far Harbor livable. Acadia also maintains a wind turbine that powers those devices. In exchange, the Harbormen allow Acadia to trade at the docks, and they direct runaway synths from the Commonwealth toward the settlement. Most of the Harbormen don't even know what synths truly are, so they hold little prejudice against them. When dealing with the sole survivor, the Harbormen act a lot like Diamond City residents, or just the usual wastelanders. But it's still pretty amazing that they've lasted this long on an island full of trappers, creatures, and now the cultists all wanting them dead. The Rust Devils are a raider gang introduced in the Automatron DLC. Unlike typical raiders, they're obsessed with robots and use scavenged machines as the backbone of their power. They appeared around the same time the Mechanists started making waves and quickly established their main base at Fort Hagen Satellite Array. The gang is led by Ivy, who sets herself apart from other raider leaders with her technical skill. Instead of just looting weapons and armor, the Rust Devils hunt down robots across the Commonwealth. Any they can reprogram are twisted into heavily modified versions that fight alongside them. Robots that can't be captured are stripped for spare parts or scrapped for armor plating, which the gang welds onto themselves as makeshift protection. They're openly hostile towards everyone, including other raiders, and they can even be seen fighting rival gangs when the Sole Survivor comes across the General Atomics factory. During the quest headhunting, the Sole Survivor is forced to deal with the Rust Devils directly. Their base at Fort Hagen houses Jezebel, one of the Mechanist's robo-brains, and is protected by raiders, reprogrammed robots, and even a massive customized sentry bot called Ahab. Both Ivy and her forces are wiped out when the Sole Survivor clears the base, leaving the gang's presence in the Commonwealth reduced to basically ashes or rust. What makes the Rust Devils stand out is their technology. They're the most advanced raider faction in the Commonwealth, with the knowledge to modify, maintain, and mass-produce altered robots by cannibalizing others. Their leader even fights with a heavily modified suit of T-60 power armor, which is far superior to the shifty raider power armor most gangs rely on. Their obsession with robotics even extends to traps, where they use things like Assaultron heads rigged with laser tripwires. They're honestly a pretty solid inclusion to factions in the Fallout world. I hope we get to see them expanded more in the future. Hopefully, the Sole Survivor didn't wipe all of them out. The Disciples are one of the 3 raider gangs running Nuka World. They stand out immediately thanks to their face covering masks and the sheer amount of gore they leave behind. It's truly horrendous. Their leader is Nisha, who shaped the group around her philosophy of survival of the fittest. The gang originally kept busy by upgrading the Gauntlet, Coulter's deadly maze designed to test challengers before they could reach the Overboss. That project suited them well, since the Disciples thrive on violence. More than anything else, they're sadistic killers. Unlike the operators who care most about caps or the pack who act like feral predators, the Disciples lean closest to what you'd expect from typical wasteland raiders, just more organized and far more bloodthirsty. Their headquarters in Fizztop Mountain makes that pretty clear, since it's littered with corpses and gore. Nisha enforces only one real rule among them: don't get caught. As long as they leave no evidence behind, they're free to do whatever they want. That can include killing outsiders, victims inside Nuka World, or even members of rival gangs. If someone does get sloppy and draws attention to the Disciples, punishment comes quickly, usually death, followed by the disposal of the body. Culturally, they see themselves as stronger and more deserving than the other gangs. Nisha mocks the operators for being greedy and says the pack are uncivilized. Most of their members are women, but not exclusively. Male disciples do exist, like Savoy. Regardless of gender, all disciples wear masks that cover their faces. They carry guns, but they say they prefer knives, since blades let them inflict slower, more painful deaths. For the Sole Survivor, the Disciples are one of the gangs that can be supported during the events of Nuka World. Depending on how things play out, they might remain allies, or become enemies in a showdown alongside the other raider factions. Or they'll be wiped out entirely if the Sole Survivor decides to side with the Settlers and trigger open season. I always hated these guys. I mean, the concept is great, really, but they are some sadistic bastards, to be sure. The Operators are another one of those 3 raider gangs. They're led by siblings Mags and William Black, with Lizzie Wyeth as one of their key members. Compared to the Disciples or the Pack, the Operators are less savage and more calculated. Their motivation isn't chaos or bloodshed, it's profit. They present themselves more like an organized crime syndicate than a typical raider gang. Their clothes are functional and stylish without being over the top, and their demeanor is far more approachable than the wildness of the Pack or the brutality of the Disciples. In their view, they're the only gang in Nuka World that really understands what the play should be about: making caps. They see the other raider factions as short-sighted, chasing blood or spectacle while ignoring the bigger prize. Even though they front a polished image, they're still raiders. They're ruthless when it comes to money and power, and they'll use intimidation, violence, or slavery if it serves their bottom line. Like the other gangs, the Operators have been stuck inside Nuka World ever since the Overboss Coulter stopped pursuing Porter Gage's original plan to expand. Their frustration has grown, since they've been unable to spread their operations or rake in the wealth that they believe they deserve. For the Sole Survivor, the Operators are one of the gangs you can side with during Nuka World. Helping them means taking part in their schemes, everything from securing new turf inside the park to claiming Commonwealth settlements in their name. I actually like this group a lot. If you had to pick a group, which one would you guys go with? The Pack is the last one of those 3 raider gangs. They're led by Mason, who holds the title of Alpha. Unlike the other gangs, the Pack lean into animal themes for both appearance and behavior. They wear bright, clashing outfits, paint themselves with crazy designs, and usually wear masks shaped like animals. Their style is meant to intimidate and boast, almost like peacocks flaunting feathers, and it makes them the most visually chaotic of the raider factions. Their hierarchy is modeled on the idea of a wolf pack. The Alpha rules through violence, not necessarily leadership skill, and members are allowed to challenge for dominance. These fights don't end in death, since pack law forbids killing one another. Instead, the loser is disgraced and usually exiled, while the winner takes the role of alpha. It keeps the gang unstable, but always focused on proving strength. They keep animals like mongrels and attack dogs, feeding them human remains and forcing them into fights against each other or against captives. You'll actually find evidence in this in the Nuka Town backstage area, where cages and corpses confirm it. They're also heavily involved in the slave trade. Traders and captives are kept in cages, collared, and treated like part of their twisted hierarchy. They have open disdain for the other raider gangs. The disciples are mocked as cowards who hide behind armor, while the operators are written off as sheep obsessed with money. To the pack, they see themselves as the only gang strong enough to live by true survival of the fittest. Helping them involves carrying out jobs like capturing slaves, killing informants, or recovering supplies in the Commonwealth. Like the other gangs, you can assign them control over parts of Nuka World and even settlements outside of the park. I appreciate you guys watching. The channel and the community have been growing a whole lot lately, and I'm super grateful, so thank you. Anyways, we have a lot more factions and Fallout coming up, so make sure you stick around. Thank you for watching, and remember, enjoyed time is never wasted time, and I'll see you in the next.